Hello.
Hello.
It's working.
It is.
Hi, Chris.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Happy here.
Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you. And to you.
Welcome to Julia's Instagram page.
Be here.
On behalf of Julia, I blew it on the cutting and pasting your description in beforehand. I'm going to somehow do that now. But first, tell us, introduce yourself.
Okay.
What's your name and what do you do?
All right. My name is Chris Jackson, and I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of a book imprint called One World, which is part of the Penguin Random House universe, but it's our own little small area of it, where we publish wonderful, amazing, really the best authors in the world.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to try to paste your description in here. Oh, I guess I can just write it. Okay. So, sorry, everyone. This is my first time hosting one of these. I know there's a lot of people in the comments who wish I were Julia, but she turned over the keys to me on her Instagram. Right. So this is what you're going to get tonight. So sorry, Chris, I'm just writing about how great you are.
Thank you.
Jackson. Wow, it's really hard to multitask. So we're here on behalf of, because it's Juneteenth, we're celebrating independence. Mm-hmm. And my first question to you is, what does Juneteenth mean to you, if anything?
Good question. So it's funny, last year we did a little Juneteenth celebration in the office, and it was just like our little crew of people. And mostly it was just taking pictures of each other, wearing t-shirts. But it's just one of those extraordinary things, I think, because if you had told me at the beginning of the year that Juneteenth would be something that we'd be celebrating all over the country, I'd be like, that's impossible. But it just goes to show you how, the velocity of ideas has really picked up, I think, in this current environment. And it's just, to me, that's one of the most exciting things about it, is that it's just an example of how quickly and easily and painlessly and seamlessly we can make, certainly of a symbolic nature, but how that might, translate to other kinds of major systemic changes we can make. And we think that these things are written in stone, but much as, the institution of slavery, which lasted for hundreds of years, it ended a little bit late for people in Texas, but it ended. And I think that's about possibility. It's about how quickly, our lives can go from one thing to another. And I think just the fact that we're celebrating it is an example of that.
Yeah. And this has been a pretty wild time for you because you've published a lot of books that are suddenly getting an insane amount of attention.
That is true. So they were getting attention before too, just to be, totally clear about it. But yes, it's been, I think that is an exciting thing that's happening right now. A lot of people are turning to books to try to understand what's going on in the present moment, to try to understand what, how we came to this moment around issues of racial justice. And it's exciting. So we publish, One World, we published Ta-Nehisi Coates, and who's, had already sold millions of copies of his books, but I think people are reading him now in a fresh way. Ibram X. Kendi, who has become a very influential and I think powerful voice in this moment. Brian Stevenson, the head of the Equal Justice Initiative, who we've published, for several years now. And of course, the film came out last year, and he's one of my personal heroes. So many people, I think, find him heroic.
If someone hasn't looked up the work of the Equal Justice Initiative, please do.
Yeah, absolutely recommend that. And what's cool about these books is that, and some of the other writers we work with, I work with, Michelle Alexander and with Nicole Hannah-Jones and the 1619 Project, who we're doing a book with next year, and many, many, many other writers, including...
With Nicole?
What'd you say?
You're doing a book with Nicole?
Nicole Hannah-Jones, yeah. We are doing a book, and we're doing the 1619 book, and we're doing Nicole's book. Nicole is listening right now.
Go write your book.
Very excited about that book. So I would never say go write that book. But anyway, what's great about these writers is I think that we're seeing right now, as we see, I guess all the time, it's the function that books can have in a moment like this, that it's books that, and particularly writers like this who have really reset, I think, our imaginations in terms of what's possible, given us a language to talk about what's going on that allows us to, I guess, see things with more clarity. I was thinking the other day just about that group of writers I mentioned, and Ta-Nehisi introduced the idea of, he did not introduce the idea, but he brought the idea of reparations back to the forefront of a national conversation. And through the power of, the articles he wrote for The Atlantic and the books he's done, he's been able to kind of shift our sense of what's possible around the question of reparations, or what Michelle Alexander's obviously done around mass incarceration, or Brian, the way he's introduced certain ideas into the lexicon about overpunishment and the connection between lynching and death penalty and slavery and Jim Crow and mass incarceration, or what the 1619 Project has done. Just, it's put 1619 into our minds as a meaningful date, and it's turned it into a national sort of conversation about the roots of this country. And so it is actually, or Ibram, who, I think, right now is a great example, who, in his book talks about...
Don't know, the book is How to Be an Anti-Racist.
And he talks about this idea of, there's the opposite of being a racist is not being not racist, right? The opposite is being anti-racist. It's a committed, active, and ongoing process that we all have to kind of engage in to free ourselves of literally the worst idea in the modern world. And these people are changing language, and they're giving us new ideas and new tools to kind of deal with old problems and opening our imaginations in fresh ways. So it's very exciting to be working with them at this moment, at every moment. But right now, it's great to see people coming to those books and ideas.
So there's some questions in the comments, Chris. Someone asked how they can find a list of all the books that you've published, and I think that's on oneworldbooks.com.
I think it's oneworldlit.com is our website, pretty sure.
Yeah. Look in the pinned comment here. You can see the One World Lit account and check them out. They've been doing some lives on here too.
Yeah, we've actually done a series on Zoom programs that are on YouTube now called Ideas in Action that have been really great. And a lot of those writers who I just mentioned we've had on, including some writers who we have books coming up from, like Alicia Garza, Heather McGee, and some others.
Fun fact, I'm one of the others.
Fun fact. You are.
My publisher too.
That's right.
My editor. So I'm starting the in a week.
Great. Great, but you did the ambitious thing though. It's a multi-book thing you're doing. So there's all kinds of things you're working on for us about climate justice and changing the world in every other way. So very excited to add you to that list.
It's exciting to dream about that. I think so often we talk about climate change, we talk about just the thing we're running away from instead of the thing we're running towards. Like, what is the future that we're trying to build? So yeah, I'm doing 2 books this year. The first one is actually already available for pre-order. At All We Can Say, if you're on Instagram, it's an anthology of essays by women climate leaders. So yeah, and I'm writing a book on climate solutions. And Chris was crazy enough to take a chance on it. So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see.
You've made so far.
I'm confident. I think it's going to be great. And I think it's really because of what you described. And this is something I think defines a lot of the books that we try to do, is that they don't just try to name, although they do try to name a problem, and but they try to imagine their way into what could possibly come. And I think that's the exciting part, it's all exciting. I think to actually name something that has eluded definition for a long time is exciting. I think being able to accurately pinpoint the roots of problems is very exciting. That's like the 1619 thing, where you can actually start to see the tendrils of history in the present. That's really exciting. But I think a lot of us right now are feeling hungry, at an inflection point like this, when it seems like things are opening up. I think people are feeling hungry for what can come next, what can fill that space. As we start to, Michelle Alexander said a great thing actually at EJI last year, when they were opening the lynching memorial they have down there. And she said, it's wonderful that we're pulling down the Confederate statues, right? But what are we putting up? What are we generating? What's coming next in that space? And that's the work we have to do. And that's what I think your books are doing. And I think that's the ambition, I think, for all of our books, is to try to fill that space. We also do poetry, we do fiction, we do, work with people like Trevor Noah and Prince and Jay-Z. So there's a range in there. But, I think at core, all of them are actually pulling in the same direction.
All of these people. This sounds like a great party. Let's bring Prince back, and then
we can play Prince's music. Prince is never
yeah. So this has been a pretty wild month, and I'm curious what you described as like the velocity of change. What has been an anecdote out of your experience that's been really poignant in the last month as relates to your work?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just what I was describing before about language and introducing new language into the world. So, I, like a lot of people, went on, marches and to protest over the last month here in New York. And one of the events I went to was a march that started in Washington Square Park. And I went with my son to this march. And it was kind of extraordinary because there were, I was standing on the corner, we were just kind of like double dutch, like waiting for our place to jump into the crowd. And people were chanting Black Lives Matter. It was kind of reverberating off the buildings of Fifth Avenue. And I was looking in the crowd trying to find Black people. So where are the Black people in this crowd, right? And then I thought, I'm working on this book with Alicia Garza, and I thought about Alicia, like, in her room at her computer 6 years ago, writing that phrase in a Facebook post, Black Lives Matter, right? Black people, I love you. Our lives matter. Black lives matter, right? Out of just the abundance of grief she was feeling at that moment because of what had happened with the Trayvon Martin case. Mm-hmm. And how that phrase is now in the mouths of, and then of course when the movement first started, it was very controversial, and people were like, the group is too aggressive, all lives matter, blue lives matter, or it's too queer, it's too many women, whatever the criticisms of it were when it first started. It has taken over the world, and it has changed the world.
I was shocked to see how quickly this went global.
Absolutely. I had a friend who told me she was in Vienna, Austria, okay? And with all that, might mean, and there was this huge rally, with people chanting Black Lives Matter. And it just shows you how, if you can, sometimes it really is a question of, you name the thing, that thing resonates. Of course, you have to do massive amounts of organizing around it, persistent work, political work, cultural work, but that, eventually it can become part of the language within all of us, and can shape the way we see the world. And so that's been very exciting to me.
We had a question in the comments. Could you talk a little bit more about the 1619 project?
Right. So, of course, It was a project that originated in the New York Times and published last year on the 400th anniversary of the African presence in America. And the book is going to expand on the Times Project. The Times Project is really a fascinating thing because obviously it appeared as a magazine and won all kinds of awards and sold out every print run that they ran on it. But it's an ongoing project, like there were some criticisms that some people had, some in good faith, some in bad faith. The Times ran a series of a programming series around it. They've continually done work to keep developing the idea of the 1619 Project. And all along they had ideas. Nicole had ideas, and Jake at the Times and their crew had ideas for expanding it to tell more stories about the extensions of that moment and that experience of slavery into the contemporary world. So the book is going to give us even more of that. I think it's going to be even more kind of rich and robust, but it'll have a little bit of responsiveness, I think, to some of the reception that the project had. And I think it's going to be, we're hoping it'll be like a landmark publication that will, again, like mark a shift in the way we think about this history.
I have a weird question for you, which is a lot of your work is about bringing these voices to the fore through books who have important messages. Most of your writers are people of color or queer. If white supremacy, if racial injustice didn't exist, would you still be publishing books, or would you be doing
Yes, I would still be publishing books. Well, some kind of injustice is probably going to exist, so I'll publish around that. I've published books throughout my career in things like on financial crisis, when the financial crisis was going on the Iraq War, when the Iraq War was going on. I've always kind of looked for the areas where I feel like there need to be more voices that are kind of fighting again toward like the kind of core sort of values that I've always tried to publish around equity, around justice, around honesty, and good government, around fairness, around economic equity. And so I think as long as those things exist, I'll certainly be publishing. But I also publish all kinds of things. Like I said, we publish poetry, we publish fiction, and I think it all comes out of, and we publish, memoir, but I do think it all comes out of a kind of connected sensibility about wanting people to tell authentic stories, and for voices that have been unheard to be heard and to be elevated and amplified and turned into art that can kind of connect with people. I think that's always going to be like the fundamental purpose, really, of literature and art.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you forever. We got started late, and now we have to go.
Yeah. Well, guess what? We can keep talking.
You and I will, but all these other people have questions for you. They don't get those.
Well, they can just buy the books I work on and read.
Buy books. So go to the One World Instagram, and that's a good way to check that.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming through.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a weird adventure, so we'll see what happens next. Okay.
All right.
So now I'm going to look for Piper. All right. Bye, Chris.